What if instead of fighting Ichigo, Transcendent Aizen went to face the Zero Squad? Aizen at the moment of full transcendence versus Oetsu, Ichibe, Tenjiro, Senjumaru, and Kiryu. With regard to Zero Squad, there are a lot of unknowns, but I'll be using the novels and character books to compensate as much as possible. First, I'll cover the individual and combined strength of Squad Zero, followed by Aizen, and then I'll come to a conclusion. Ichibe Hyosube is the high priest and leader of Squad Zero, and based on what we've seen, he commands the greatest power, his primary opponent being pre-almighty Yuha, the Quincy King who had enough power to steal and control Yamamoto's Bankai, and was also stronger than Royd, who could take and parry attacks from Yamamoto's Shikai, and convince him to go into Bankai in the first place, despite Yamamoto having the prior knowledge that his Bankai will threaten Soul Society. Yuha also has the ability to give power, allow it to grow, and then take it back. Through this process, he gained additional powers and became stronger before facing Ichibe, accomplishing this by absorbing the souls of dead Stern Ritters including Royd and James being the actual Stern Ritter and not Master Masculine. Yuha would have also absorbed the souls of the Shinigami who died at the hands of the Stern Ritters. Ichibe was capable of keeping up with Yuha in their fight and could destroy his energy construct with his bare hands. He could destroy his Blut and Haben with hidden Kido spells, and overpower the Blut itself with arm strength alone. With Senritsuke Show, he can summon enormous spirit appendages which are strong enough to send someone like Yuha flying over vast distances. With his base Zanpakuto, he can cut through one's name and reduce their powers as a result. Upon releasing Shikai, he has ownership of all the black in the world, and he can then use this black to paint over his opponent and their weapons, removing all their powers. And with the first Bankai, he can etch a new name into whatever has already been painted over, granting a new power and existence as a result. And what seems to be his most tremendous technique, the Futen Taisatsu allows him to steal darkness from future knights of Soul Society, and upon reciting a chant, constructs a mausoleum of existence erasure. The High Priest has also demonstrated resistance to power stealing. He's demonstrated posthumous telepathy, as he called out to Ichigo's mind after death, and can be restored by taking powers from others when they call his name, although this doesn't seem to be able to restore all of his power at once. Furthermore, even Yuha considered Ichibe's wisdom to be of such magnitude that he was chosen as a special war power, possessing wisdom which spans beyond Soul Society's 1 million year history, paired with cosmic awareness which allows him to see all of Bleach's universe. The argument for Yamamoto from 1,000 years ago being above Ichibe can be made. However, this is heavily dependent on whether or not Yuha used the same Almighty against Yamamoto 1,000 years ago. The lore of the confined Quincy King implies that he had the same power 1,000 years ago. However, since characters like Oetsu and Ichibe who have the data from that fight seem to know nothing about the Almighty, and even Yamamoto, who mocked Royd, whom he thought was Yuha, for being powerless without his sword and arrows, shows absolutely no knowledge of the Almighty either. Perhaps Yuha dispersed too much of his powers to his Stern Ritters 1,000 years ago, which would explain why he would possess the Almighty and yet not be able to use it against Yamamoto. Although I think the anime will handle this explanation a lot better. Oetsu Nimaya is known as the Toshin, or the Sword God. He is the creator of the Zanpakuto. He challenged the entire Schutzstaffel, or Yuha's elite guards, by himself, despite their present reputation as Yuha's strongest men. You can also imagine the Schutzstaffel as a tier of soldiers where Yuha's strongest men can be ranked. For example, someone like Royd. While in possession of what he described as the sharpest blade, Sayafushi, his swordsmanship was so immense and his speed so terrifying that the Schutzstaffel could not keep up with him. This was essentially the equivalent of breezing through captain class characters with speed and swordsmanship alone. Naklevar's evasion took place after he studied the sharpness of Nimaya's blade. His only instance of affecting Nimaya was due to the death dealing's durability negation, and the moment he was restored, he simply speed blitzed asking Naklevar. The Sword God also had data from the fight between Yamamoto and Yuha 1,000 years ago, and the battle between Royd and Yamamoto, and despite not knowing what Yuha was up to, as he didn't know the latter's unique abilities, based on the information that he had, he still thought he could tag him and cut off his arm, which would require relative speed and attack potency. Although I wouldn't necessarily grant Oetsu equal power to Yamamoto's Bankai, since we don't know that much about him. But considering that he thinks he can tag someone like Royd, and he hasn't even shown a Bankai or Shikai, I would rank him above Yamamoto's Shikai. But we don't know enough to make him equal to Yamamoto's Bankai, especially in the area of attack potency. And according to 13 Blades, Sayafushi is Nimaya's Zanpakuto. The Hot Spring Demon, Tenjiro Kirinji. According to 13 Blades, Tenjiro the Lightning Flash was an agile and fierce soldier during his time in the Gotei 13. His moves are so fast that he could surprise even Soifon, the commander-in-chief of the Onmitsukido, someone who is considered one of the fastest captains in the Gotei 13, although the character book places Yamamoto's speed above Soifon's. Tenjiro is also the inventor of Kaido, or the healing arts of Kido, and was so adept at this art that he was able to teach it to someone like Unohana. A master healer can regenerate even some fatal injuries in the midst of battle. The fact that Tenjiro excelled in Kido so much that he could create an entire branch of Kido by himself shows what tremendous spirit energy and Reiatsu control he must have, and implies tremendous mastery over the arts of Bakudo and Hado. He also has the ability to summon the water from his pond and manipulate it, obtaining benefits like healing his injuries and removing poisons, and can use the more offensive water to drain his opponent's Reiatsu and burn them. His Zanpakuto is called Kinpika, but unfortunately we don't know what its abilities are, although it appears to be light-based. Kiryu Hikifune is known as the ruler of the grain. She was a captain of Squad 12 before Kisuke Urahara and invented the artificial soul, which, much like Tenjiro Kirinji, shows that she has tremendous scientific intellect. If you use the Spirits of Forever With You novel, she also has an entry there. During her time in the Gotei 13, Kenpachi Kuriyashiki thought she could handle Menos-class threats in the same way that he could, meaning that he didn't think less of her abilities. Genryusai also noted that she'd put on weight since the last time he saw her, which could imply that she's gotten stronger since then, since we know that she eats to boost her strength. She could also use her own Reiatsu through her food to boost the Reiatsus of Ichigo and Renji to another level, elevating Ichigo's Reiatsu beyond what he had in the full-bring Bankai state, within his body specifically, which could speak volumes of the amount of spiritual power that Ikifune herself possesses. Ikifune's Zanpakuto is her spoon, but unfortunately we don't know what its abilities are. She should also have masterful Reiatsu control, as she's able to mold her spiritual energy into food, which would also imply her prowess in the art of Kido. She can also shoot 3 branches from her body, which have the ability to consume the enemy's Reishi and spirit energy. And despite Yuha's tremendous spiritual energy, the Zero Squad was confident that the Cage of Life could contain Yuha, Uryu, Haschwald, and the Schutzstaffel, at least as far as spirit energy and raw power goes. Although she would require prep time to make a cage this massive, a condition which would definitely apply to this battle. The final member of Zero Squad is Senjumaru Shutara, the Great Weave Guard. For the most part, she is known for her tricks, intellect, and speed. The Zero Squad had arrived outside of the Serete, and before many characters could realize, she was quick enough to enter the Serete, retrieve Byakuya, Renji, and Rukia from where they were being healed, flashed over to Squad 12 and retrieved Tensa Zangetsu from Mayuri's lab after breaking his code, and returned quick enough to surprise even Soifun. And by combining the Divine Soldiers with the speed of what seems to be her clone, she could move so fast that she could bypass Nine-Zol's instincts. And she could also use her cloth alongside a copy of herself to trick the Schutzstaffel into thinking they invaded Royal Palace, completely bypassing even their advanced Reikaku spiritual senses. And although Mayuri was angry about Senjumaru breaking into his lab, both he and other characters praised Senjumaru's tremendous scientific intelligence in the Kanfir own-world novels. The Zero Squad was also described as a force surpassing the strength of the Gotei 13, although this statement would more than likely apply up to and around the point where it was stated. Instead of just saying that the Zero Squad lost to Almighty Yuha and the Ashwelin Schutzstaffel, I wanted to flesh out their abilities a bit more, so I hope that was very informative. Now let's talk about Transcendent Sosuke Aizen. What if after achieving full transcendence, or butterfly form, instead of facing Dangai Ichigo, he constructed the Oken using the power of the Hogyoku and the souls of Karakura Town, and headed straight for Royal Palace? But could Aizen make it to Royal Palace in the first place? Some people think Aizen was wrong about the Oken, simply because it's the bones of the Zero Squad members. However, that was the objective in using the souls of Karakura Town, to construct an Oken which he didn't have access to. And interestingly, it should be noted that Squad Zero was aware of Aizen and his ambitions to replace the Soul King, and with Ichibe's cosmic vision, which can see even beyond the universe and into the Valley of Screams, they would quite literally see Aizen coming, and would likely construct a fake royal palace from cloth, along with Hikifune's Cage of Life. In only his first fusion, Aizen could already feel all of his abilities evolving. Surpassing all of his old powers would mean that spiritual pressure, speed, strength, durability, sensory powers, and everything else is increasing. And it should be noted that all the damage which Urahara, Isshin, and Yoroichi seem to have inflicted on Aizen did not hurt him but simply affected his exoskeleton. And Isshin's inability to perceive Aizen's spiritual power was evidence of the massive power gap between them and his second fusion. In third fusion, he acquired enough power to destroy the Cleaner, which was an entity of reason or law beyond the limits of Shinigami's spirit energy, which means that at this point, Aizen is operating in the realm of reason beyond the limits of Shinigami's spirit energy. He also believed that he could not be bound by reason either, either, and believed that as he evolved he would go beyond its limitations. Feeling his power reaching higher, he advances to the confines of reason. Furthermore, the Cleaner was described as something that Soul Reapers had to avoid at all costs, which even the combined efforts of Soul Society could not restrain. Furthermore, it has the power to hurl entities centuries into time, destroying them with the temporal flow. And yet, to prove that his power was superior and that it was not confined by reason, Aizen destroyed the Cleaner. It should also be noted that Gin's interaction with Aizen was not a contradiction to this. As soon as Aizen entered Fake Karakura Town, Tatsuki and the others could sense his spiritual pressure. This was not because Tatsuki was above Isshin in power, but more so, according to Aizen's own explanation, because he was lowering himself. They could sense his presence all throughout Karakura Town because he lowered himself to toy with them. This was something he mentioned when he was faced with Ichigo's overwhelming power. And he did this again in Fourth Fusion, which is why Tatsuki can feel an overwhelming presence from him. It was during this time that Gin Ichimaru took the opportunity to attack Aizen, and the very first thing he attacked was Aizen's heart, which is a wellspring of spiritual power. That's the most viable explanation unless you want to argue that Gin's Bankai can operate at a level beyond the Cleaner. Following this, Aizen evolved into a being who completely transcended Hollows and Soul Reapers. With regard to Shinigami and Hollow, he transcended everything. And it was not only from Aizen's perspective, as this was confirmed numerous times over in the official character book Unmasked. This transcendence would also put Aizen above a Bankai Yamamoto, as he transcended Shinigami power overall, including Shikai and Bankai. Aizen's genius intellect and evolved senses would more than likely be able to see through Senjumaru's cloth illusions. But even if he gave Senjumaru the benefit of the doubt, he would simply rip through her clone and then destroy the cloth constructs. And if the Holy Soldiers are supposed to be comparable to Yuha's Soldado, who are literally foot soldier quinces, Aizen's spiritual pressure would tear them apart. For Tenjiro Kirinji, even if he went as far as to argue that his speed was above Soifon's, Aizen would have transcended Yamamoto, who was noted to be the greatest in the four arts, including speed. There's also nothing to suggest that his Zanpakuto would work at Aizen's level. We also know that some Shinigami could withstand the effects of Tenjiro's spawn for a while. Even if you propose that this could somehow work against Aizen, his spiritual power would be way too substantial to be drained quickly. He would more than likely bypass it and get to Tenjiro, or simply teleport. The same speed difference would apply to Senjumaru, and she has shown the least amount of raw power as far as Zero Squad goes. The most she could do is distract and stall Aizen if he's being arrogant, which, if you go in that direction, would allow Ikifune to activate her Tree of Life, which can consume the Reishi of her opponents and could probably consume even Yuha's Reishi. However, he could either teleport out of it, or if he believed that Aizen is simply disassembling and reassembling, he could simply stay in the cage and face Oetsu Nimaya, or overpower the Cage of Life with power that can defy reason. Oetsu doesn't really have enough showings or statements to make him equal to Yamamoto's Bankai power. However, even if he made him comparable to Yamamoto, as maybe he could be, Aizen would still be superior given his transcendence. As such, the best resistance Royal Palace would have would be the monk Hyosube. If you go by the logic that Ichibei is above Yamamoto, and you consider that everyone who comes in contact with Yuha's soul, including the Stern Ritters, will have their powers given to him upon their death, then Ichibei would have fought a Yuha who more than likely contained the power of Genryu's Sai, along with other quinces, and the remains of Soul Reapers who fully died and were not resurrected, like Sasakibe, although none of these characters were as strong as Yamamoto. As for Aizen's transcendence, his soul would have been structured according to his wish. He witnessed the tremendous power of Yamamoto's Shikai, and as someone who is well versed in the Shinigami arts, would understand the power difference of Bankai. And as revealed in the Kan for Your Own World novel, Aizen studied the history of Soul Society, even up to the point where Yuha fought against Yamamoto. So that historical lore, paired with his understanding of Shinigami power, would give him a general understanding of Yamamoto's power level in Bankai. Although he wouldn't know everything about his unique techniques like Zanko Natachi East and so on, which even Yuha was not aware of. But the fact that Aizen was already transcendent over everything, and according to his desires being granted by the Hogyoku, would surpass Yamamoto's general tier of power, to the extent that the latter could not sense his presence, as this was in fact his desire, would place Aizen further above Yamamoto than Ichibei was. In addition to the fact that he should already be able to one-shot entities which are already beyond Shinigami power, which function in the realm of reason, even before attaining butterfly form. Gaining the high ground over Ichibei in terms of raw power and stats would allow him to tank, disintegrate, or recover from his attacks. Ichibei's best option would be to resort to name-cutting, blackening, and rewriting. And with superior stats, Aizen could simply evade all of this and counterattack. And the Mausoleum of Death requires multiple lines of incantation before it's activated. And while Ichibei does have the best chance of beating Aizen, even if we grant these things, it wouldn't be the first time that Aizen encounters something that affects people's powers on a more fundamental level than Reiatsu. We know the Hogyoku can grant Aizen power to affect beings who are so far beyond him that he can't even sense their powers. powers, evolve his abilities so much that he could affect Sulking Yuha's Almighty, survive and recover from attacks which are far beyond this level of power and also nullify his existence, and the Hogyoku's very existence being an affront to reason, with the power to not only create Soul Kings, but to remake the very soul from its foundations and grant abilities of varying immensity. The narrative also implies that the royal guards who were already mentioned in the story were among those who were already transcended by Aizen, and it was further implied that if Aizen was successful in making the Oken and had made it to Royal Palace, that would have sealed the Soul Society's doom. I don't want it to be one-sided, so maybe Royal Palace could find some way to win, especially if we consider Aizen's solitude as a factor which could decrease his power, although we're going by the basis that both sides want to win. But for the most part, I would give the victory to Sosuke Aizen. He defeats Zero Squad, becomes the King of Souls, and remakes the world. I hope this video will help you with your own comparisons, and I hope it gives you a better idea of how strong both Aizen and Zero Squad are. If you're a fan of Bleach, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.